Hi, good morning, everybody. I think we should get started. Sorry, my name is Blakely Nixon. I'm the Communications and Events Coordinator at the Validate Network. Today we have a really exciting event with two speakers who I will introduce in a minute. I just want to cover some basic housekeeping things about the event. As I've said a couple of times, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your webcams off. This is for two reasons. A lot of you are under 18, and it's just for very good child protection reasons. And secondly, it really helps with maintaining the connection from South Africa. When we get to the Q&A, you can type your questions in the chat, as many of you have already been doing, and I will try and manage some of the questions, but we will read the questions out so that our two amazing speakers can ask them. And if you have any questions or any thoughts afterwards, you can actually get us on Twitter. We're at Network Validate. But with all that said and everything in place, I'm going to start introducing our speakers. Professor Michele Miller. If you could turn on your camera, Michele.
Here I am.
Hi, Michele. Michele is a research chair in Animal TB at Stellenbosch and one of our network investigators at Validate. Michele leads the Animal TB research program at Stellenbosch, which takes a multi-pronged approach to improving our knowledge of bovine tuberculosis. And Wynand, if you could turn on your webcam. If it works, there we go.
Yes.
Hi, and Dr. Wynand Goosen is a postdoctoral research fellow also at Stellenbosch in South Africa. He was awarded a spot on the top 10 young emerging scientists as selected by the National Science and Technology Forum, and was also inaugurated, quite excitingly, as an explorer in the National Geographic Society. And with that, I'm going to shut up now and hand it over to Michele.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just very excited to be here. I'm going to turn off my webcam now because the connection from South Africa is not always the best. And we're going to get started. Whoops, let's make sure that you can see my screen.
I can see the screen, so I'm sure everyone else can.
Blakely, can you? Okay. Well, again, I'm very excited to have been invited to speak with you this morning. Hope that we'll have lots of great questions from you. And I just took it from the perspective of currently I'm a TB researcher, but I know that sometimes people wonder how is it that we got to where we are today. So as people that are just beginning your career, I wanted to share a little bit about my story and see if it'll help you with reach your dreams as well. So I'm a wildlife and zoo veterinarian. So I've been a clinician for over 25 years. And throughout my career, I've always been interested in research. And now I am a full-time researcher and I have a specialty certification in zoo health management as well. So people might think, okay, you don't sound South African, you sound American. And in fact, my story starts in the United States. So I was born in Wisconsin, which is in the northern Midwest of the US. And I moved around quite a bit within the US to different zoo jobs. And it was only in 2013 that I made my permanent move to South Africa. So quite a ways away from home. But again, starting back in Wisconsin, I think I was probably a lot like many of you are today. I loved animals. That's me and lots of pets. Enjoyed the outdoors. And one of the things that really inspired me was back then there was a TV show called Daktari, and it was about a veterinarian and his family living in Africa and working with wildlife. And I thought, oh my gosh, that would be a dream come true to be able to do that. But being a girl from Wisconsin, it didn't seem like a very feasible possibility back then. But what was nice is my love of animals really gave me a lot of curiosity about science and math, and I really enjoyed my classes, and they really inspired me to think about what kind of career paths I might have as I got older. So after I graduated from high school, I, again, like many families, we didn't have much money for me to go to university. So I actually started going to university in Wisconsin, going to night school and having a full-time job during the day and on weekends to save up enough money that I could finally start to go full-time. While I was at the university, again, I studied science, so I got a bachelor's in zoology and a bachelor's in physics. And some of my courses, like in animal behavior and immunology, really inspired me to thinking about how I could incorporate science into a career and my love of animals. So as I finished my undergraduate degree, I knew I wanted to study medicine, but there wasn't a veterinary school in my area. However, they were building one. So also wanting to become a scientist, I went ahead and I went to graduate school and got a master's and a PhD in, I was studying infectious diseases and the immune responses in cattle. And as I was finishing that degree, I applied to the veterinary school in Wisconsin and was accepted. So that was, again, two dreams come true already at that age. And of course, my love for animals continued as I went through veterinary school, and I went to some student veterinary meetings, and I was very fortunate to meet a veterinarian and researcher from the San Diego Zoo, Dr. Werner Heuschli. And he really was a role model for me. And I got up the courage at that meeting after he spoke to come up and talk to him. And he really was a mentor to me. He knew that I was interested in both science and wildlife medicine. And I was able to arrange a summer work experience with him. And then after I finished veterinary school, they actually offered me a postdoctoral fellowship at the San Diego Zoo, where I did research looking at diseases in both cheetahs, rhinoceros, and also I had the opportunity to go to Australia and do some field work looking at diseases in koalas. So obviously that really cemented my career path in terms of really wanting to pursue this kind of thing and develop expertise throughout my career. So from that point, after I finished my postdoc, I was a little bit torn. Did I want to continue to be a full-time researcher, or did I want to do veterinary medicine as a clinician? And I did follow that path to be a clinician and worked at a number of different zoos around the US, the Los Angeles Zoo, Busch Gardens in Tampa, Florida. I also worked at the Walt Disney World when they first built Animal Kingdom, and then the Palm Beach Zoo. And during that time, working with these animals and learning more about their specific diseases that they develop, and trying to figure out how do we really assess health and welfare for these animals, it really got me thinking about all the different questions that we really didn't have answers for. So this led me to, again, developing a research program kind of on the side that was very applied in looking at how to solve problems of health in both captive and wild animals. So this was an incredible experience because it really, again, allowed me to meet a lot of different people with different expertise, to travel around the world, both teaching and doing field, and really starting to ask bigger questions. But beyond that, you know, as a clinician, we, whether you're a human doctor or a veterinarian, we are usually focused on the individual animal's health. But the more time I spent and the more I looked at the kind of the problems and the questions I had about that animal's health, I realized that it's not that simple. It's really, we need to look at it on a bigger picture basis. So for instance, how did the humans that work with the animals or that are surrounding our national parks, how did their health impact animals? And what about the environment? When I worked at the Los Angeles Zoo, I soon came to realize that, for instance, some of the animals developed respiratory problems because of the smog. So we have to always keep our eyes open and look to see what is going on in the kind of the world around us and take a kind of a different approach instead of just looking at diagnosing a particular problem or disease. So during this time, one of the things that happened was that there were some elephants that were part of a circus that actually died. And during the investigation, we found out that it was caused by human tuberculosis, human TB. So this was quite startling, and it goes back to that issue of how do we interact with animal health, affect human health, and these type of things. So tuberculosis is not a big problem in humans in developed or first world countries, but it continues to be a very significant global health threat for both people and animals. And this is a bacteria that can be transmitted between a lot of different species. So we got involved, I got involved with a number of committees and task teams trying to look at how human tuberculosis was affecting our animals. And also we started to think about with zoos, because oftentimes people interact with the animals, can diseases be spread between those different species? So it's really important, again, to think about things in a much bigger picture, and you realize it's really quite complex. So thinking about a disease such as tuberculosis that can affect many species, the question is, well, is it the same in all of these different species? If a elephant has it and it passes to a human and the human is working with giraffe, for instance, is there a risk? So it actually raised a lot more questions than we realized. And these pictures in this slide actually represent many of the species here in South Africa that we've now found can get infected with the bovine form of TB, and in some cases also the human form. So this really started to get me thinking, and I started to develop a research program in the zoos, and I had the opportunity to develop some collaborations with veterinarians and researchers here in South Africa, because we had so many questions that we couldn't answer about TB in animals. And of course, that led to a lot of research programs that we started to develop. And in 2013, I was actually awarded a research chair to do this full time. And that was my opportunity to move to South Africa and start to develop our research team. And you can see our group from last year. There's a picture there. So we have people from all different areas, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, that are students with our group and working on all different species and different research. And not only do they work in the lab, but they also work in the field. So we had to develop new techniques to try and determine if an animal was infected. How do you do that? How do you test a buffalo or a lion or an elephant for TB? It's not quite as easy as it is in humans, and even with humans, there's still a lot of questions. So that's really where we're at today is we keep very busy with trying to answer a lot of questions about diseases that affect a lot of different species, not only wild animals, but livestock, pets, and humans that are in contact with them. So one of the keys that I think is really important whenever you develop a profession is understanding that it takes a team. So I wouldn't be able to do this work without having developed a lot of relationships with students, other researchers, veterinarians, companies, national park personnel, human medical experts. And so it's really important to think about not so much what you can do, but what you can do as a team, because everybody has their own expertise, and together we're much stronger. So I think just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, when I was young, I had thought about being a veterinarian, and that meant really focusing on the health of an individual animal. But as I went through school and I had different experiences, I realized that I couldn't answer questions and do the best job I could as a veterinarian in helping a particular animal unless I really understood what was going on in that species or population, what their environment was. And we, as veterinarians, from human medicine and human disease research. So reaching out and working with professionals in all sorts of different fields has made my job wonderful, and I learn something new every day, and it always keeps it exciting with the work I do and moving forward as I go through my professional career. So some of the lessons I think I learned and just wanted to share with you is, you know, as a girl that started out in the Midwest of the US with no exposure to Africa or wildlife per se, I dreamt about being a veterinarian and researcher in Africa, and it took a lot of years to get here. But if you are really passionate about something, you know, don't give up on your dreams just because that doesn't happen overnight. And as you can see, the path to getting to your dreams is never short or straight. So sometimes you're going to be doing something and you think, well, how is this going to get me there? But it's the opportunities that come up that you don't expect that often are the most rewarding. So don't be afraid to take those opportunities, try them out, and even sometimes fail or stumble. So, you know, people think, okay, well, why would you go to graduate school if you want to be a veterinarian? But all of those pieces in the puzzle come together in really creating the person you want to be and helping you follow your dreams. And I think it's also really important that you don't think just because you've decided you're going to follow one path or one career, that later in life you might discover or through an opportunity have something else come up that takes you in a different direction. So, you know, be open to those chance happenings that can really influence where you go in your life. And probably the biggest thing is never stop learning. You know, as a researcher and a veterinarian, I'm reading scientific papers and talking with people and going to conferences, and I'm learning all the time. And that's what really makes life interesting and fun. So that is just kind of a brief story I wanted to share with you. And I think that my colleague, Dr. Huysen, will give you another alternative to think about. But in no means does this mean that we are telling you this is the way to go. Each of us has a very unique path, and I hope that you'll be able to find yours. So with that, Blakely, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. And might I compliment you on your timing? That's excellent. Now, so I'm going to just hand over to Wynand if he's ready. Maybe you.
I am, thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Michele. It really sets the mood for mine. I just quickly want to share my slides. Let me know if you guys can see it. Blakely?
We can now, yes.
Yes, wonderful. So, hi everyone. My name is Wynand Goosen. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in the Animal TB research group that's headed by Professor Michele A Miller. And yes, today I want to talk about my pathway to becoming a wildlife researcher that was a lot different to that of Michele's. And hopefully you can use my journey as a reference to apply to your own lives. So life will always start and end, and what you do in the middle is what matters, and you should utilize it to pursue your passions. I think that's the most important message. So I was born in 1989 in South Africa. It's a low middle income country at the most southern tip of the African continent. South Africa is one of the most diverse countries in the world. It has a long coastline that stretches along the South Atlantic Ocean and also the Indian Ocean for more than 2,400 kilometers. While its coastline is lush, the rest of its geography is vast, flat, sparsely populated and dry. South Africa has the largest economy in Africa, and the tourism is one of the country's greatest sources of revenue. Unlike other African nations, agriculture accounts for less than 10% of the population's employment. The land is so dry that 43% of South Africa's total rainfall only occurs in 13% of the coastal land. Megadiverse countries are those that with a majority of our planet's species. So South Africa is incredibly biodiverse and is ranked 6th out of the 17 megadiverse countries. And there's more than 20,000 different plants and a wide diversity of mammals. More specifically, I was born and bred in the Eastern Cape province, one of the most wildlife abundant provinces in South Africa, with numerous rural farming communities that closely lives with their livestock. In this province, you can go on an African wildlife safari in a malaria-free environment and have a beach holiday all at the same time. The Eastern Cape boasts with not only the Big Five, but the Big Seven. It includes the elephant, rhino, buffalo, rhino, leopard, whale, and also the great shark. Growing up in this province, it was normal for us getting frequently exposed to a wide diversity of wildlife growing up, and also livestock roaming the streets of our local towns, especially as the human populations grew and the town sizes increases, eventually overlapping with the habitats of wildlife and causing the need for well-defined boundaries. So boundaries between animals and humans were a big deal, especially when livestock and wildlife owners clashed. I always thought that it was because of lions and other predators eating their livestock, but only later in high school I learned that there was a lot scarier predators out there than lions and leopards. These were diseases that infect livestock and hides out in wildlife. The reason for wanting these barriers between the animals then started to make a lot more sense. This really enticed me a lot, and more and more I asked questions about these boundaries between the animals and the scary diseases that everyone was so afraid of. My interest just kept on growing and growing. What was just as interesting was all the different type of professions necessary to maintain these boundaries. Veterinarians, medical doctors, the SPCSA, the general public, and scientists. Yes, if you can believe it, scientists. This concept was really interesting to me, and ridding of those boundaries between careers to work together to maintain boundaries between animals and humans are defined as One Health, and this really sparked some questions when I was a child. So why does boundaries interest me? So my parents always supported us to break loose of stereotypes. When someone said that I can't do something because I fit in a certain box, then I made it my mission to prove them wrong. This was how I was brought up. In my family, conservative roles didn't exist. You did what you wanted to do and you found your passion and you follow it. In school, I loved sports, choir, drama, debate, science, and mathematics. When people told me that the first team rugby prop couldn't be in a debate team or couldn't be part of a athletics team, then I acknowledged their limiting way of thinking and went out to prove them wrong. Actions speak louder than words. This is why when I came across the idea of animal boundaries, I wanted to know why. Why are these boundaries so important, and why do they need to be enforced? So my research and questions led to some startling statistics. The monsters everyone was so afraid of was called zoonotic tuberculosis, and Michele touched on this a lot. It's a disease caused in humans and animals, predominantly by the bacterium Mycobacterium bovis. And in 2016, 147,000 new cases of zoonotic TB was diagnosed, and 12,500 human deaths in Africa. So that was very, very scary for the place we live in. So my research led to reaching out to various academic institutions to better understand this and to find out how I can get involved, but really get involved to make a difference. I found out that there is still so little understood about TB, especially in animals, that the only real way to get ahead of this problem is to equip myself with the knowledge to better understand the infected host and the bacteria itself. With guidance from various professionals in the field, that was friends of family and researchers from these 3 institutions, it became very obvious that molecular biology was the perfect field of study for someone with my type of interest. Much like the concept of One Health, it comprises of various scientific fields that need to be applied together in order to combat zoonotic infectious diseases. My undergraduate degree consisted of 6 majors. Again, I decided to have 6 majors because people told me it can't be done. It included microbiology, chemistry, genetics, biology, physics, and also biotechnology. And then eventually I decided to go to Stellenbosch University because I heard about Professor Paul van Helden and Professor Michele Miller and Sven Parsons, that was already busy doing intensive TB research in animals in South Africa. However, I still first had to get through my undergraduate degree before I could pursue this career. Also, I chose Stellenbosch University because I could play rugby for one of the top varsity rugby clubs in South Africa during the 6 years pursuing my training. So finally, after 4 years of undergraduate training that required immense sacrifices in my life to obtain, I was finally accepted to pursue an honours degree at the same division where the same researchers was that I wanted to work with. To my shock, when I got there, the honours degree was very general, and we had to select specific projects from different research groups. There was only one animal TB project, and there was 3 of our students interested in it. So I dug in my heels and decided to fight for the project. This research was what I wanted to do since school, and nothing was about to get in my way, especially giving up my rugby career. After one meeting with the HOD, it became very clear that I was there for one reason and one reason only: animal TB research. I was given the available project and grabbed onto it with both hands. So my first tiny baby project I was given was to design TB diagnostic tests for African wild dogs. This project was designed so that I can familiar myself with the environment, the literature, and also determine if I could grasp the bigger picture of TB and why it's a problem in all life and not just humans and animals. This was something I was thinking about since school, so this came naturally. It was only after my honours degree that I started to earn the right to participate in in-depth discussions and starting to design my own research questions, the questions from when I lived in the Eastern Cape and the new ones that was brewing while I was scrumming during my undergraduate studies. This led to me pursuing my master's in molecular biology and then subsequently skipping my master's and working towards a PhD in molecular biology, primarily focused on infectious diseases in African wildlife. 15 years later, after asking my first few why questions as a kid because of a couple of cattle and donkeys walking in the streets of Grahamstown, I'm now a postdoctoral research fellow in the group exactly where I wanted to be, fighting tuberculosis in animals and humans. Hopefully one day I will lead this group after Michele passes the baton. So during this, you may ask yourself, why does this matter to you? Well, my wish to you is that you take something from my story and apply it to your life. Find those big why questions that matters to you. Do your own research and obtain the knowledge to get the answers yourself. It is important to know that finding your answers are more important than the titles you wish to have. Those titles come naturally while you're busy with the work that matters. Like everything in life, there are different ways of getting to that point. And sometimes, or most of the times, the best ways aren't getting there, or for getting there isn't necessarily the obvious ways. Rather, find your passion and the values you stand for, fight for them, and don't give up. There's no right or wrong career in your life. What matters is that you do what makes you happy every day, and you pursue that. I thank you for your time, and Blakely, back to you.
Hi, thank you very much. Wynand, can you can you stop sharing if that's okay? And if Michele and Wynand can turn on your camera so we can see you. Need to turn mine on as well, actually. So now's the time if our students and our teachers can type in your questions into the chat box. If you could include sort of your name and where you're from, etc., just so we get an idea. But I think I'm going to start with the questions, if that's okay. If I can use my abuse my role as chair and just ask rather simple question. In terms of all the animals you've worked with, what is your favourite and what is your least favourite? And I guess I include humans in that. I guess from a practical sense as much as anything.
I guess I'll start. It's always tough to say your favorites, but I've been known to be very fond of everything big and gray. So that's elephants, rhinos, hippos, those type of things. And like you said, in terms of the ones that I least like, it's probably humans because it's, you know, as a veterinarian, you're trained to communicate through nonverbal means. And oftentimes it's really tricky when you're dealing with people because you get mixed messages and oftentimes we aren't communicating on the same wavelengths. For instance, when I have a angry cat that I need to vaccinate, I know exactly what it's feeling, but sometimes with humans it's a little bit harder to tell.
So lately with me, I think my favorite animal is the honey badger, because there's nothing in Africa that can stop a honey badger from doing what it wants to do. And I think the species I'm most scared of are leopards, because they're highly intelligent predators and they will stalk you for weeks before finding the opportunity to get to you. So that's me.
Wynand, you're out in the field at the moment, from what you said earlier. What are you doing? Where are you exactly?
So I can't share where I am, but I'm deep in the bush, in the northern bits of South Africa, testing over 200 African buffaloes at the moment. I feel a bit I'm torn in two because our team is currently in the field working on those buffaloes, and I'm sitting here talking to you guys. So as soon as we're done, then I'm going to be head out and go help them sample those buffaloes.
So we haven't had any questions coming in. I'm hoping everything's okay in terms of being able to type, although people were typing before. There we go. Right, there's Holly Roberts. Are there any ways of specializing other than doing a postgraduate degree? So a career question. So are there any ways of specializing other than doing a postgraduate degree?
I think it's getting harder and harder to, a lot of people in the past did specialize simply by going out there and getting experience. There's still people that do that, but I think it's important to have some type of foundation, whether it's experiential or an apprenticeship. Doesn't necessarily require a PhD. But I think there's a lot of different paths that you can take, but certainly it's getting more and more competitive, especially to work with wildlife. And so that may be having that specialty degree may help you get your foot in the door. Dana, I don't know, maybe you have a different perspective.
No, I agree, Michele. I think the competition is started out there, so at least do some internships and even, I mean, Google announced the other day that they're not even looking at university degrees anymore, but they're taking people with experience and diplomas over that. So I mean, that obviously speaks a lot to experience. So I think just get into it, start somewhere and give it your all.
And Kirsty Holland has a really good question, which is how many animals does TB kill each year? I guess that's quite a broad question, but I think I'd ask on top of that, how does it compare to other pressures on population and endangering animals, etc. How big an issue is it?
Baden, go ahead and start this one.
So it's varying for species, right? So if I could take African buffaloes as an example, there's certain areas in South Africa where the prevalence may range from 10% to 40% in these herds, which is alarming because most of the time they stay asymptomatic and they harbor these diseases for months to years while interacting with livestock, rural livestock, at the boundaries of these parks. And then that spills over into livestock and then eventually gets to the owners and their families. And if you guys think about the HIV prevalence in South Africa and Africa in general, then that makes them a lot more susceptible to getting infected by M. bovis, which can lead to illness and death. So it's to do with the bigger picture. Other species do get infected and fall ill and die. But yeah, like Blakely said, it's a very broad question, so I can't go into every single species, but Michele can elaborate if she wants to.
Well, I think especially since we have people from the UK, this isn't a disease that just affects African wildlife. Many of you may be aware of the big problem with bovine TB in cattle and the interface with badgers in the UK, and even with all the expertise and resources, this is something that hasn't been successfully managed yet. Wynand brought up the point, it's also something that it's not like COVID or Ebola that you get infected and you quickly show symptoms and die. Most of the time, infected animals don't show any signs until their disease is very advanced, and at that point, you know, it's difficult to deal with. And of course, they could be infecting other animals and people all during this period of years where they're not showing signs.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to point out for those that Danielle Moore has just posted some information about some of the work that they do at that Michele and Wynand's group do at Stellenbosch, so you might want to check that out. Sam Wambi has a really good question, which is, what's the scariest experience you've had out in the field?
Wynand, go ahead and start.
Yeah, Wynand probably, but
Right, so yesterday we were darting buffaloes in the camp, and then, say for example, there was 10 of them, so 7 of them were darted, and then the remaining 3 would just lie down with the rest without the vet really knowing if they darted them or not. And while you're walking from animal to animal, these 3 they just suddenly jumped up and started chasing us. So so yesterday was one of those up there of the scariest experiences we have.
They're very dangerous, buffalo, aren't they? Like one of the most dangerous animals in South Africa.
They're known as the Black Death of Africa because they would kill elephants and rhinos and other species as well, lions including.
You had a slightly more exciting work there than I did yesterday. How about you, Michele?
Yeah, I think, similarly, when we're, out in the field, and especially, for instance, if we're working, we had a big lion TB project, and you have to catch them at night. So when you usually dart a number of animals, like Wynand said, oftentimes when animals are in group, they'll lay down and pretend that, they're sleeping with the rest of their group. But, when you have to go in and start working on them, they can suddenly jump up. And sometimes if it's taking longer than we expect, with the lions, they will start to get up and wander around. So we have to be, we started putting hobbles on them just to slow them.
Sorry, Michele, I don't know whether it was for everybody else, but you broke up on that last sentence. Can you say that again? Because it sounded quite exciting.
Oh, sorry. So we learned the hard way that sometimes with some of the drugs, the lions can wake up very suddenly, especially if
they're stimulated. So to slow them down, we started using Velcro hobbles just so they can't chase you as quickly.
I guess I have a question, which is I'm guessing this differs from animal to animal, but broadly speaking, how does tuberculosis actually harm you? What does it actually do to you that causes harm and can actually kill you? What are the actual impact? I've never quite 100% understood that.
Anna, why don't you start?
So it's a respiratory disease. So it infects you and hides out in your immune system, hijacks that system and to replicate within the white blood cells. So it's scary because it will literally, if I can put it, what I call it more simply, it will clog up your lungs. It will cause difficulty breathing and eventually suffocate the infected individual.
And in some species, the organisms can go to other organs, and it can grow slowly. It's almost like having cancer. So the mycobacteria take over the normal tissue and the normal function. And so over time, the function of that organ then is compromised. And basically, it's called consumption because the disease as it grows is consuming the resources that the body would normally use for, revitalizing tissue and organs and things like that. So wasting away is a very common sign that we see both in humans and animals with disease.
Yeah, and Sam has a sort of related question. Is it do animals spread TB faster than humans, or is there a difference in how fast they spread amongst the different species?
So that's a great question because we actually don't know. We, as Wynand said, in humans, we think of this as a primarily respiratory disease, and in animals that are housed together or very social, like cattle and buffalo and those type of things, it's also primarily a respiratory disease. But you can also get it transmitted through the environment. So these bacteria are very hardy and they can live on pastures, and so animals can either inhale or consume them. So it really depends on and whether the animal, because it has another type of disease or something like that. So it's a really complex question. Why as animal A don't get infected, but you as animal B do get infected and develop disease. So a lot of it is the research we're kind of working on.
I just want to add on that, and the difficulty with research in wildlife is species-specific reagents. So a lot of times we have to modify what we have available to us to do our research. If you think about what's commercially available, it'll be human tests most of the time, or domestic pets. And then we have to modify something like design for a domestic cat to work in a lion, or something for a domestic dog to work in a wild dog. So we're facing basic scientific challenges at the moment just to get tests that can answer these type of questions. But we'll get there one day.
So I think we got time for one more question, but whilst we're waiting for people to think of, then by the way, Sam Wambi, that's two excellent questions, so thank you very much for that. I would just like to talk about BCG100. Now this talk is part of our BCG100 program that Validator are organising. We're marking the 100th anniversary of the first use of the BCG vaccine for human beings, which took place in Paris in 1921. I'm about to post a link into the chat now, but it's validate-network.org/BCG100. We have lots of interesting activities. I'm currently working on a educational computer game, actually a couple of computer games, but you can find out how you can get involved at that link I just posted. And Michelle Tom, who's one of our members, for students that are perhaps not sure if they want to do a PhD or perhaps aren't interested in science, are there still roles within wildlife research teams, and how can they get started? That's a good question. Thank you.
Excellent question. And I think, Wynand and I both took a, kind of scientific training approach to getting into wildlife. But as Wynand mentioned, with, the question of One Health, we need people that have expertise in all areas. So if you're not interested necessarily in being a veterinarian or being a scientist, you can also contribute by studying something like animal behavior. We need people that understand sociology, so working with communities around wildlife areas. We need people that understand economics. So how do we, develop jobs for people around protecting wildlife and those type of things. So quite honestly, I think that there are, numerous opportunities in a lot of different fields that don't have to do with science. So even things like developing social media or marketing or PR around, again, conservation and wildlife and protecting wild areas. So I think, it's by your own dreams. So, if you want it to happen, you'll find a way, and you just need to talk to a lot of different people.
And Wynand, do you have a response to that?
Well, I can add on, but I'm not going to directly respond. But I agree with Michele. It takes a group of professionals to make One Health work. If you decide to go into science, or if you decide to help out at the SPCSA, or if you go to the Endangered Wildlife Trust and find out how you can get involved, then it'll become clearer the avenues available to you to follow, which will 90% be of the time not even be scientific. There's lots of ways to get into this. If you want to, just start asking questions and start doing something about it.
Thank you for two excellent answers to a very good question there. I've got one more question, which is again from me, because I just didn't. If you could work anywhere else in the world doing similar research, is there any part of the world that you think, I'd like to go and work there because the wildlife's quite interesting, etc. Michele, if you could start with that one.
One thing I didn't mention, Blakely, but I've been able to work in a number of different countries and continents. So in South America and Latin America, other countries in Africa, in Asia and India, exactly. So I've had a little bit, lasted months, not years. To be honest, I absolutely am thrilled to be where I'm at. I'm actually based in Kruger National Park, which is one of the world's most iconic wildlife parks, and I just feel like it's a privilege to be here, and I love, the challenges of working in other countries and working with other species, but I'm quite happy where I'm at.
Dr. Goosen.
So from my side, exactly the same, Michele. I would love to be involved in wildlife research in other countries, but yes, I'm born and bred South African, and this is the only place where my heart will ever want to be. No, I'm exactly where I want to be.
Thank you very much. Now, if I think this is a really good time to wrap up, and that's a really, really good point to wrap up on. And I'd first of all like to say thank you to the two excellent speakers. Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Wynand. And Wynand, I apologise about the 50 ways I pronounced your name throughout this whole process. And I'd like to make a plug. I'd like to make a plug for our next event. Michele is speaking again on the evening of the 9th of June. And it's going to be quite interesting because it will be with a British researcher. So there'll be some discussion of the comparison between British wildlife TB and the animal TB that they do in South Africa, etc. So that'll be if you go to the link, the BCG100 link, you can find out information there. But if you have any questions or afterthoughts, you can tweet us at Network Validate on Twitter. Let us know, and I'll pass the questions on to our two excellent speakers. So with that, I'd like to say thank you once again, and I look forward to hearing any follow-up questions, and do get in touch. Thank you very much.